It's a weird feeling when you're sitting in a hospital room. You're not thinking about, you know, the next day or the next week or month. You're just thinking about what's right in front of you. And what was right in front of me was the doctor saying, yeah, you're probably never gonna ride bikes again. And she said, if you even waited a few hours, you would have had a full-on pulmonary embolism and you could have ended things right then and there. When you get a blood clot, you don't really realize you're having it until it's already there. I originally thought I pulled a muscle in my leg, and like most cyclists and athletes, you just ignore it. You put ice on it and go, okay, it'll go down later. You know, when it came to the pain, it just started increasing. Got to the point where my leg was stiff, it was brown, it felt like a hard water balloon to the touch. And I ended up just having to hop on it with one leg. Yeah, so we actually have learned that it affects other cyclists, especially at a high level. At a certain point, I thought, do I stop Veloworthy completely? I went complete radio silent. The future of the brand is still yet to be told. There's also human stories that need to be told, and that may not always be from a bike race. It could be from so many different things. And I feel that, you know, we're just getting started with it. You know, it's a hard thing when someone tells you news you aren't ready to hear. And when the doctors told me I probably shouldn't ride my bike anymore, that hit me hard. Doctors didn't know I'm a cyclist. They didn't know about Veloworthy, they don't care. They just want to see myself get better. But the mental impact, the physical impact of not being able to ride is something that is really hard to deal with and even reckon with. That was a big shock to me, for me to ignore an injury and wait that long, because I thought in my mind, if I just put some ice on it, maybe wear some compression, it'll make it go away. But this is not the case. And I'm glad that I was able to go into the ER and get fixed, because who knows where I would have been. I can't say for sure that my life is going to be the same as it was. I mean, whose life ever is, as much as time passes. But I like to think that I want to get back to a level of a mental state and physical state that I was before the blood clot. What happened was I finally went to the ER. They saw me and admitted me within 5 minutes. Put me in a bed, did an ultrasound, x-rays, everything. And then they knew it was a clot. They immediately admitted me into the hospital and put me on blood thinners. They had called the vascular surgeon. He explains to me what I have, which is called a blood clot, a DVT, something more specifically called May-Thurner syndrome, where you're born this way, so it's not genetic. He explained how the surgery was gonna go, which meant he would have to go in, make an incision behind the knee, and basically pull out all of the coagulant, all of the blood clot. He installed a metal stent, which is about 100 millimeters, and it sits right in the iliac vein and it blows it open so blood can flow. And that's why he was so hesitant about cycling, because he said, look, if you're riding a bike and you're in that position and you're leaned over and you're pedaling, that's gonna crimp the stent, which is basically like a gigantic metallic boba straw. Once that's in there, it doesn't come out. And once he does the surgery, he doesn't want to do another one. It took about an hour to get everything out and install the stent. When I woke up, he showed me the tray full of what came out of my body. It was pretty nasty. And after that, I would be on blood thinners indefinitely. I was released from the hospital, I think the next day. And from that point on, I had to walk with a cane for a good month. I couldn't do a whole lot. Cycling was out of the picture. I was just trying to get through like day by day. So at that point, I kind of lost my focus. There was nothing to really post about. I couldn't go to events. Veloworthy as a brand kind of stopped because if I couldn't ride and I couldn't film, then it was a matter of, okay, now what do I do? So I didn't post anything. I didn't post, I didn't respond to anything. There was nothing on YouTube. I went complete radio silence, which in a way has its advantages because you're kind of free from that, but at the same time, when you're out of the picture, even though at one point you're very relevant in the picture in our sport, it's a very isolating feeling. I got depressed. I got really confused with what I wanted to do with not just the brand, but with my life. And, you know, would I ever ride again at the level that I was before the blood clot? At a certain point, I thought, do I stop Veloworthy completely and just let it be and not post anything or create any more videos? You know, when you're not creating stuff and you're not creating stories and things like that, you feel under this pressure to either feed the algorithm, to create stories for people to see, and you're seeing everybody else produce such good work. I've got a pile of gear that, you know, I've either requested or companies have sent me that I want to review that I've been sitting on, and you feel this time ticking by, and it stresses you out when you know that, like, okay, I know I want to do a good job on these things, but I can't because of everything that's going on, and that's really hard to process. Once I got off the cane, it was like, okay, how far can I walk without the cane? Can I take the stairs instead of the elevator? Can I get on the bike and ride up and down my street? And everything was a minuscule baby step of a journey. And that became my new challenge every day. You know, with athletes, we are impatient. When we get injured, we want to get right back to where we were. But I knew that if I did, it could set me back even further. Probably the longest period of my life where I've gone without cycling. When I have gone out, it's normal for me to keep a very slow pace because the doctor told me your chances of getting another blood clot are highest within the first year. So if I make it to the end of the year with no clot, it gets considerably less as you go down. We actually have learned that it affects other cyclists, especially at a high level. When you're doing this repetitive motion over and over, it can tend to not let the blood flow easily through your body, especially your legs. And it's a very repetitive, fixed motion.
The year was about 2022, and I went to bed one night feeling an odd sensation in my shoulder. It was a week after coming back from Crusher. High altitude race, get home, and then I have a sensation in my shoulder. It felt like an orthopedic issue. It wasn't painful, but it just felt off. I wake up the next morning, it still feels a little bit off. I spent a little bit of time on Google because in particular, I had those sensations when I would take a big deep breath. Get to the hospital, do the CT scan, I think a CT, and they show that lo and behold, I have a pulmonary embolism.
You know, I knew so little about it going into it. I don't have any family history. I don't travel a lot, but you know, according to the doctor, I was born with it. I had May-Thurner syndrome, which has veins crossed, but it's like a king toes, and over time, it just builds up and builds up where I couldn't take it anymore.
Physicians can't say that I had enough lengthy travel or enough dehydration for that to be the cause of the PE. From there, I think 3 months of high dose of blood thinners, and after that, I'm on a lifetime course of blood thinners because I have an unprovoked pulmonary embolism.
Being on this medication, the doctor's like, well, you can't take any risks. You can't cut yourself. You can't go hit your head because anything could cause internal bleeding, and I'd have to go into the ER right away.
So here we are at Sea Otter. I raced Sea Otter yesterday. I think I'm a good example of how you can still live through having a PE. I come off the thinners about a day and a half before I race because they're relatively fast acting. Get through the race safely, hopefully, presumably. If I have an issue, I go to the hospital so that I make sure I don't have a brain bleed, and then I get back on them. So it sucks. I won't lie about that. I don't like being on thinners. I certainly wish I wasn't on them, but in speaking with physicians, it is to my advantage to be on them than to not, because the not could also mean you might be 10 feet under.
You know, I'm I'm growing with the sport. The sport is evolving. It feels like every minute. I'm realizing that there are other people out there that are doing this and doing the YouTube thing. They're doing videos, and I am not a gravel pro with a big social media following. I don't have a journalism background like other people where they can really create these stories. I'm not a tech engineer, but I think there's a way of telling human stories via the bicycle. And that's something that I can lean in on. And people look at these events, they want to talk up close and personal to the pros. They want to see what they're eating. They want to see what they're riding. And I think there's always going to be people that are interested in that. But more so than just those details, it's also being able to talk about some of their struggles, because they're going through a lot of the same things that everybody else is. And it's talking about not just their struggles, but their triumphs, their failures, and their journey. And for as big as the sport is becoming, I think there's a place for me in it and a place for Veloworthy in it.